Iran that it was clear that Iranian nomenclatura needed also a new tension with, not a war like now, but with Israel to control the situation. But wait a minute, the same goes for Israel. Remember what went on in Israel just a couple of months before October attack. Hundreds of thousands of people, mega demonstration against Netanyahu's attempt to take over Supreme Court and so on and so on. And they needed this war. That's why, here I have a tough question for you. Maybe you will have, you always know how to squeeze out, my God. You need gulag. Because, you know what? I would like just to know more. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but what goes on, as it were, behind the scenes, for example. This is confirmed. It's not paranoia. Friends from Israel, authentic anti-Zionist, played to me the audio clips. Do you know that till 2 years ago, Israel fully supported financially Hamas?
For 20 years they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
For 20 years.
Why? But they said...
It was very clear. Netanyahu explained it. It's on YouTube. He said because it is the only way of ensuring that we will convince the Americans that there will never be a two-state solution. Yeah. If Hamas represented the Palestinian people. Allow me a Hegelian answer to your question, if I can. Let me try it out.
Today I'm in a good mood, so you can.
Okay.
You see, this is... Are you... Sorry, now I make a very serious remark. You think we are joking, but that's the spirit that we bring. We can be radically ethical, sacrifice our lives, and so on. But if this type of simple, benevolently evil irony disappears, we are in a world where I don't want to live. Sorry,
I agree entirely.
Yeah.
Look, firstly, a point of principle. Hamas, like every Palestinian, Fatah, individuals, had a duty to attack the fence that fences in the Gazans in a concentration camp. Gaza is not a country, it is a concentration camp created in 1948. Anyone subsisting in it, not living, had a duty to themselves, like POW, prisoners of war, people have a duty, according to the Geneva Convention, to escape. They had a duty to attack that fence and the sentries of the IDF that were there fencing them in. They had no right to attack civilians because this is a war crime. So I'm making this point directly. But I think that Hamas were absolutely right to attack the fence when they did. For the reasons that you are advocating. Because this conflict in the Middle East, which begins with a project of white settlement, ethnic cleansing, which is the project of the State of Israel, which insists on being a Jewish state, like saying, imagine saying today that we want England to be a Christian state. I mean, it's only, the Robinsons of the world and the ultra-fascists who are talking about that in this way, or Greece as Christian state. So this project... Yeah,
but from my Western European, you Greeks are Orthodox, you are not true Christians, but that's another point.
Late 2023, we have the following situation. You described very well the inner contradictions within Iranian society. As Hegelians and Marxists, we have simultaneously to support the woman life freedom movement and not side with the imperialist attempt to subjugate Iran from the United States perspective of regime change.
Now, I want to ask you...
Well, let me finish, because the Hegelian thing has three components. So you have the inner contradictions of Iran, which need to be played out. Then you have the inner contradictions of Israel. Because in Israel you have a gigantic clash between the original Ashkenazi, European, pseudo-social democratic conception of the nation state that is Israel versus the brutish, fascistic settlers of Judea. So you have the Judaist state versus the Judea state. This is a clash within Israel. And then you have the Arab world, where Donald Trump was very successful in his first term to create the Abraham Accords, which essentially take 6 Arab states and manage to have a deal with Netanyahu's Israel that essentially freezes the Palestinians out. So most of the Arab world agreed that the Palestinians can be allowed to wither, to die slowly and perish in silence. So this breakthrough, when the Hamas fighters went through the fence, essentially allowed the Hegelian dynamic in Israel, in the Arab world, and in Iran to play itself out. How it's going to play itself out? We know that at the moment, whole people are being pulverized. South Lebanon is becoming, again, killing fields. The Israeli society is totally tormented. Progressive Israelis are abandoning the country. They are emigrating, leaving it to the fascistic settlers. This, in the end, cannot end well for Israel.
Yeah, totally.
This cannot end well for Israel. So I gave you my
No, I will now, if I
answer.
allow me, although I'm more and more at my old age a common sense man, and I'm a little bit tired. This guy all the time mentions Hegel. No, seriously.
I'm in good company.
Yeah, seriously. Would you then agree with me? Another idea came to me. You know, reactionaries often used to criticize in a brutal racist way so-called, I don't like the term, third world countries. They use the way failed state, no? I say, why don't we use this term? I will try to give you a precise definition of a failed state, very naive in bourgeois terms. Failed state is for me a state which no longer can reproduce itself without openly relying on illegal gangster bandit forces. Now, of course, every conservative will me, of course, look at Haiti, primitive state, 80% is controlled by gangs. I say, okay, but let's go on. Israel is a failed state in this sense. Look who is Ben Gvir. Are you aware that Ben Gvir, who is now, that's unimaginable irony, even Hegel would get dizzy in this. He is now responsible for security, public on the West. 20 years ago, he was condemned as a criminal by the Israeli...
Convicted, not condemned.
Convicted by the Israeli court. So settlers, I agree with you. They are basically a form of violent gangsterism which was deftly manipulated. Now it's openly supported for decades by the state of Israel. Formally, they distance themselves from it, but and so on. And I think same things you find all around. In Russia, it was similar with Wagner Group.
Yeah.
First they said, no, it's independent, then we learned that. And even in the United States, you know, the paradox of Trumpists and other is that, for example, Proud Boys and so on, you have groups here that should awaken you. If you have some sympathy towards authentic Judaism, and we both have, who are the new American populist right, many of them. There's some mistake there, erase it. It says, please.
Don't worry, this is for me. In 4 minutes, you will have to come up with decent questions. Or indecent questions.
No, what I want to say, is that Proud Boys and so on, they are paradoxically anti-Semitic and at the same time anti-Arab, they are a nightmare, but nonetheless, the state more and more tolerates them. This is, for me, the true problem. Another problem, I wrote a text, would you agree? So we live in a world more and more of failed states. We don't come to look for them in poor, so-called third world. We get them here in the developed so-called West. Second point, your idea of neo-feudalism. I wrote a short text, maybe you know it.
Techno-feudalism.
Sorry?
Techno-feudalism.
I know. Here we will, in Gulag, when I will visit you, we'll debate this. But sorry.
So he will visit me?
Yeah, maybe.
We've established that.
I'm a warm human being, why not? Okay. You know what? Would you agree or not? You know, I always try to ask myself, okay, big conflicts, Gaza, Ukraine, and so on, but horrors are also going on everywhere around now, like in Sudan, mega war, and there is, would you agree or not, that's the idea came to me. We have techno-feudalism, big corporations and so on, ultra-developed. But is it not that in many so-called, sorry for the term, third world countries, which are, I use this term consciously, cursed by too much natural wealth? The best explanation a Marxist friend from Congo gave me is if all the natural wealth, mines and so on, diamonds, were to disappear from Congo, it would have been poor but much happier country. Okay,
Indeed.
What I'm saying is
like
that
Singapore, for instance, has no natural resources.
Yeah, so my point is simply, I will be over very quickly, this idea that I studied a little bit the situation in Sudan, not South Sudan, that's another nightmare. You have simply so-called, it's a suspicious term, but I use it because they are in our media, a warlord really as a feudal master controls a certain domain and of course sells to big Western companies. So would you agree or not, the sad thing is that we have this big, ultra-developed techno-feudalism, which is more and more accompanied by even more brutal than in the developed Middle Age, brutal, true local feudalism. You have a warlord who totally controls. So even this feudalism has two sides. Yeah. We should never forget how our wealth in the West is sustained by extremely brutal conditions.
And local dictatorships and local mirror images of the oligarchies of the West.
Yeah.
Of the oligarchies of the North.
Yeah.
Because we need to go to the Q&A part of our meeting, can I share with you something that I missed?
You now want to be, this is my trick. You will say Q&A and I will ask you the first question.
The law. No? And I have, it has been bestowed upon me, this duty of controlling the
Don't talk like Stalin.
Yes.
Yeah.
But look, Slavoj, we come from a very problematic part of the world, the Balkans. I miss Yugoslavia. Do you?
Yes and no, and I'm not trying to squeeze out in a pseudo-Hegelian way. I will tell you what, maybe we will disagree here. I was there, and since Slovenia is, as now our new beloved president, not yours, but Donald Trump once said about some country, shithole of a country, no? Slovenia was, in a good sense, when it became independent, shithole of a country, in the sense that, you know, like, even under communism, general secretary of the party was not a guy whom once a year you saw in a limousine protect. It was a guy whom you could meet on the street even without bodyguards.
Because of decentralization.
Yeah, and all that. So I knew that, you know, I think, maybe you will disagree, that the original scene was Milosevic, who Yugoslavia worked as a certain fragile coalition with many unwritten rules.
Why would I disagree? I think Milosevic was a bastard from hell who killed communism in Yugoslavia. And self-management.
That's my point. So,
don't
I don't buy this usual story from some English leftists. You Slovenes are even the worst. I know Slovenia, again, is the shithole of the country. I knew personally, at that point, General Secretary Milan Kucan and others. From 85 on, they were desperately trying to save Yugoslavia in some slightly different forum, and they failed. So I agree. When you said this, I agree with you.
So we agree. Again. To inject a little bit of interest in this boring consensus of ours. The floor is yours. Let's have some lights on. And we have a question from the back of the downstairs room. Actually, no. I mean, you will decide, right? I do not want to have this kind of exorbitant power.
You know how you solve this problem? It's easy. As a good old Stalinist, we should know it. You ask for written questions, and then you say, oh my God, we don't have time for all the questions, and you censor it. You're a bourgeois liberal, secretly.
I'm lots of things, all bundled up together. Okay, who is speaking?
Hello. You will forgive my pitiful
we
understanding.
can't see you. We can't see you. Where are you?
Hello.
Stand up. Okay, good.
The process of digital alienation is quite central, I think, to your recent book, Yanis, Techno-Feudalism. Could you argue that in the way that it takes your data from you as a form of value, forgive me, I'm anxious.
Don't be two old idiots here, don't be, go on.
I'm so reassured, Slavoj, thank you.
We are all vermin.
In the way that it takes your value from you in data and then an ability to sell things back to you, could you argue that this process of digital alienation within techno-feudalism serves the Hegelian notion of particularity even better than capitalism, in that it cultivates desire in you, gives you what you don't even know you want?
I agree. Techno-feudalism is, because of the development of this mutant form of capital, cloud capital, which is completely and utterly hardwired into our brains, has greater capacities for exploitation, false consciousness, and alienation. So I agree. But a question for Slavoj.
No, sorry. I will also, briefly, I will answer in, I hope, agreement with you. It's that the mystification is even deeper. I wonder if you would agree. What is absolutely crucial, in some sense, the other side of techno-feudalism, big corporation, and so on, I think maybe, I'm one-sided here, the most fascinating invention of this new, no longer capitalism, is precarious work. Why? Because the way it is sold to you ideologically is there are no workers, we are all small capitalists. You own your own means of production, computer, and so on.
And service providers.
Yeah, and the irony is that then there is no way, because if we were to be both precarious workers, I don't see them as the enemy. You are my enemy.
Indeed.
And so you see, at the same time, it blurs social antagonisms. Some is capitalist with billions, I'm with 10,000, but we are all the same.
It's not just precarious wage laborers, it's unwaged laborers. Yeah, every time you upload something on Instagram, you are performing work for a cloud capitalist, which enhances usually his, capacity to play tricks with your mind and modify your behavior so that he can use this power to grab more rents from the rest of society.
So you agree with this line of thought which was just proposed, a brief yes and no, that to understand today's post-feudal, whatever, capitalism, it's crucial for Marx, the development was from rent to profit. Yeah. Now it's crucial to understand the return to rent.
Yeah, actually they're going forward to a kind of cloud rent, which is based on capital. So the difference with feudalism was not based on capital, whereas techno-feudalism is based on a hyper version of capital. So Marx would have been ecstatic with the idea that, and also very horrified, but also very energized. He would never sleep at night. He would be writing Das Kapital again, in order to take into consideration this new form of capital, which essentially makes it necessary for us not only to break our chains, but also to break our mind chains. Because cloud capital is hardwired into it.
But, but the one problem that I see, so next question is me, sorry, fuck you, to you. It's, where I see a problem with feudalism, but I will be very brief, I'm sorry. But nonetheless, capitalism, like in the horror of today's techno-capitalism, techno-feudalism, is that while in the old level 1.0 feudalism, you had a clear position as a serf and so on. The horror for me is that this new feudal slavery or servitude is sold to you, and people even experience it as the ultimate freedom. You do what you want, you serve. That's the horror for me. That's
as you said, you're made to believe that you are volunteering everything, that you're being served by the machines when you are serving the machine, which is essentially, more or less the Marxist idea of false consciousness and the alienation to the power of n.
Hi, yes. So
Hi.
I wanted,
we managed to, to squeeze you in.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask further of an extension for the idea of Lacan and Trump, because it kind of, everything moved very, very quickly. And I wanted to know how it factored into the idea of Lacanian enjoyment and what your thoughts were on that in regards to the fact that kind of Trump mobilises the surplus enjoyment capitalism promises but can never deliver, but also that he almost provides this intersection of superego and surplus enjoyment, and that's, to me, is what almost knocks his appeal. But also the idea that knowledge is also a barrier to enjoyment, and it's almost one that Trump knocks down. And it's shown by the fact that people are so ready to accept the fact that he does lie, but also in acts like raiding the Capitol. It's like he almost circumvents all the knowledge in the world that tells us what all the problems are. So I was wondering what your opinion is.
I'm so sorry, I don't have, because to give you a proper answer,
That's
and
okay.
I'm praising your question, it's like, let's take a break and then I talk till 11. No? Because, you know, again, part of this in a confused way I developed in my book, Surplus Enjoyment. My point would be that to understand today's racism, anti-feminism, Trump and so on, you need a category introduced by Lacan years ago of the theft of enjoyment, in the sense of, it's not just I'm exploited by them, but it's either, and that's the whole point of way of life. The other, the intruder, wants to destroy our way of life, rituals, the way we enjoy, or this is the usual form of anti-Semitism, the Jews have some secret pleasures of their own, they escape. Without these libidinal categories, for example, in Trump, isn't this clear? Even in a very primitive way, people enjoy his dirty jokes, and the trick is here, that's the danger. Even if they consciously say it's horrible and so on, but they nonetheless enjoy it, and that was my reading. That's why I'm very ambiguous towards Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale. I caught myself in my worst anti-feminist racism, whatever, when I read the book before the TV series and so on, and although I said, horrible, my God, what oppression, but I was secretly enjoying, oh my God, now they invent this, the bad guys in power, that's how they screw women. You know, I was fascinated by the new ways how women are neglected, humiliated, tortured, and so on and so on. So never underestimate this. And this brings us, when you mentioned knowledge, no? Here I must refer to the work of my good friend, and I hate her because he's, I think, now brighter than me, Alenka Zupancic, who precisely brought out this functioning of ideology today where it's not enough to provide correct knowledge. We live in an era of fetishist split where we have this well-known formula, je sais bien, mais quand même. I know very well, but I don't really subjectively assume it, as she, Alenka, in her last book, Disavowal, developed. Today, we are moving even a step further, that knowledge itself becomes a fetish. Like, we know it all, so don't annoy me, let's do nothing. How do I know this? A joke at my own account. When I was, sorry if you know this, in psychoanalysis, it was a brief personal crisis 50 years ago almost, I, as you can imagine, talked all the time.
No.
You know why?
No.
Ah, you are surprised. Me, such a calm guy, mostly fast, yeah. Because I was mortally afraid that if I stop talking for a second, the analyst may ask me a really hard question. So the idea was, and I think a lot of the bullshit we say today against global warming and so on is, let's talk a lot about it so that we don't have to
think about it.
Sorry? Yeah. But okay.